Hello everyone, we just wrapped up a live session where we go over frame and panel joinery using Shaper Origin. We cut these beautiful bridal joints into the rails and the stiles, and then we come back and cut grooves to accept these panels. Now, in the session, we're going to talk a little bit about the specifics of bits we can use and the details of bench pilot. If you are watching this on YouTube, this is a live show. Mistakes may happen, but we'd love to have you there next time. So every other Thursday, 4 o'clock Pacific time, we have a session. Every week is different. You can sign up at sessions.shapertools.com, and we'd love to have you in the live one next time. We do giveaways, and you can ask us questions during the show. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Shaper Sessions. I'm Sean, and today I also have Bench Pilot with me. There is no Jake. It's just me and Bench Pilot. It's going to be a fun show. Reminder, this is a live show, so if there are mistakes, you will see them. If they're not, you can thank me. And, you know, we're going to have the ability to chat, answer questions in the comments. Ted's going to be in the comments answering questions during the show. And at the end of the show, we'll go into a Q&A session that's live where I'll answer any of those questions you have. So put them in the chat and we will get to it. Today's show is one I'm very excited to bring to you around frame and panel joinery construction. It's been on my mind for a while that maybe Origin has some interesting ways to deal with some of these things, and I've done some frame and panels in the past, and I was starting to think maybe there's some cool interaction with Origin. So this is kind of a new joint. I don't think we've shown this on sessions before. So today we're going to talk about the frame and panel, specifically the bridal joint, and we'll talk about how I'm kind of constructing lids for a small box. So with that, let's jump into it. Ian, let's come over to my computer real quick, and I'm going to show a couple things. If you're not familiar with what a frame and panel is, they're everywhere. Essentially, it's a way to join wood to allow for doors and panels that need wood movement to occur. And so the way that works is, if we scroll down here, the panel of the wood is essentially inserted into a groove in these rails. And the idea is that you can have wood movement in the middle of this frame, but the outside frame doesn't move that much. And so when you design, you have to take in some considerations for it. But in general, you can kind of help fight the wood movement by letting that panel move around throughout the year, but then all the outside will stay the same. And this is an old school technique in woodworking. As you can see here, the wood will mostly move laterally. And so in general, we're going to leave a little extra room on the sides, but the top's not going to move much vertically. So we're going to leave a little extra room in those grooves so that the panel can contract throughout the seasons. And then, you know, if you look back, there's a bunch of different ways to do these kind of frame joints. You have everything from a traditional mortise and tenon to the new looser tenons to the bridal joint, which we're going to focus on today. A stub tenon, which is like a smaller version of a tenon, a little easier to make. And then there's a router bit style and rail joint that is like essentially made on the router table where you can make those things with 2 different router bits. So we're going to focus mainly on the bridal joint, mainly because I think it's a cool looking joint and pretty unique. So let's come back over here and we're going to talk through how we're going to do this. So today, we're going to start cutting the bridal joints first, and then later we'll cut the grooves for the inside of that panel. And I wanted to, before we jump into it, talk about a few specifics. So we're going to come to this overhead camera. Let me move my computer out of the way a little bit. All right, let's see. So for instance, if you imagine this went all the way around, we would have 4 parts, top, side, bottom, and then the panel on the inside. Now, what you get out of this bridal joint is a really sweet looking joint at the top here. I don't know if that's coming through, but you basically get the end grain of one piece and then the end grain of the other piece coming through. When you look at that at an angle, it's pretty striking. Now, in order to do this, you can essentially think of this as a 3-pinned box joint. It's just 2 on the outside, 1 on the inside. And so there are a couple things when we design these files that we need to take account for. In this one of the biggest things we need to think about is what bit we're going to use. So if you come over back to here, these are 1 inch wide, which means I need to be able to cut 1 inch deep. You're going to see when I put this on the workstation, we're going to kind of put it on the workstation, and then we'll use the bit to kind of cut vertically like we would a mortise and tenon, which means we need that travel. And the wider this gets, the deeper we need to travel because they have to fit in here, and we don't want to leave any outside edges exposed. So the width of your material is very important when you're doing this with origin because router bits have a certain distance they can cut, and also origin has a certain distance we can cut. So if you think about this, this is great for a smaller frame and panel because we only need to cut 1 inch. But if we need to cut a very large door that was 2 or 3 inches wide on the frame, we wouldn't be able to cut that with origin. So that's kind of a limitation of some of the stuff I've been doing. The other limitation is the thickness of your material. So in order to get a 3-pin bit, a 3-pinned joint here, you have to be able to pass the bit through the middle. And so if you had a very skinny piece of wood and you wanted to make a joint, you wouldn't have a bit that was wide or skinny enough to join through there. So in this case, I found that the 4mm bit that we have is pretty great. It only has cutting flutes to about, let me remind myself, it only has cutting flutes to essentially 3/4 of an inch. But if you notice here in the geometry, it doesn't get bigger until here, which is a little over an inch and about 1.1 inches. And so I'm going to show you a technique that allows us to cut longer than the bit of here. But this 4mm bit's really great for these little joints. If you want to make a bigger one, for instance, something like this, which is more like 1.6 inches wide, you can kind of see the difference here. A lot bigger. This is actually getting closer to kind of what I would consider, a cabinet door. Maybe not quite. 1.6 is probably right on the edge of that. But for certain door panels, that would be pretty good. And in this one, we can use a 6mm bit. So the 6mm bit actually has a pretty long depth of cut. And so you can use that full origin range on here, and I'll kind of walk you through that when we build it. So just something to take into account when you're designing these, that you need to be able to think about the width and the height you're cutting with the bit you're using. Okay, now that that's out of the way, I think we're ready to get started. Okay, so let me pull this up. Okay, so I went ahead and milled up 4 little pieces. These 2 are the same. These will be the width, and these will be the length of the box. Okay, so I just milled those 4 up. These are 1/2 inch wide, which is just a little bit more than I need for that 4mm bit. It turns out if you needed the minimum thickness for that 4mm bit, you'd need about a 1/2 inch stock. So I'm right on the money. And what that means is I'm going to have that 1 pass through the middle and then 2 on the outside, and that's going to equal my stock. Now I could always make it bigger, and I could make that center channel wider. But in general, with these bridal joints, you kind of want even thickness on the 3 pins. So you do need to think about that. With the 6mm bit, you can go about 0.7 inches thick minimum. So you have a little bit more leeway there. But we're working on a little small jewelry box, so we're going to keep it pretty small. So start by putting one of these in the workstation and showing you how to set it up. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to move this out of the way so we can do it. Now, step 1 is we know we're going to, if we come to this camera here, let's see if we can see it from the bottom. We're going to basically put this here, and then we're going to cut vertically down like we would a box joint, okay? So that's how you can think about it. Now, in order to do that, we need to cut at least 1 inch down because that's how wide this is. So I need to move this down. Now, the first step of the workstation is 1 inch deep. And so if I do that, I'm probably going to cut into the workstation. So you would normally say, put it here at the first one. Nope, not in this case. We need to move it all the way down because we need 1 inch of clearance in the bottom. So I'm just going to tighten that at the lowest level. And then because I have these kind of small pieces here, I just went ahead and put the angle fence on because it wasn't able to touch both of the pins. And this is kind of a nice little accessory when you have short joints. Okay, we'll go ahead and throw this on the top so we can index off of it. Now, one of the things that I wanted to show actually before I do this is where I put the clamps. So we got a little extra camera gear, so I need to take this off so I can slide it in there. I'm going to put the clamps kind of at the top, 2 rails here. So you can see I'm using this one and this one for the clamps because I don't have a lot of height to clamp these small pieces. And we will get better efficiency if we kind of keep it right there. So we'll go ahead and put the support bar back on top. If you're not familiar with the workstation, it's really built for all this joinery stuff. I'm just going to reference the left side, and then I'll go all the way up. Then I'll bring these clamps over. These clamps are great, especially when you have a bunch of camera gear in the way. And then I'll just tighten that one down. Yes, yes, yes. All right, so now we are clamped, and you can kind of see what we're working with under here. Maybe if we go to that under cam. Cool, so we have both of those, and I'm going to use the support bar in this case because I don't want Origin to, bend. Anytime we're using Bench Pilot with Origin, I'm going to make sure that we have this support bar here so that I get a nice, perfect 90-degree cut to the stock. Okay, so now we're in there. All we need to do now is set up a grid. So I'm just going to come over here. We'll do a new scan, start this up from scratch. Slowly rotating around. Go ahead and save that. I went ahead and put the engraving bit upside down inside of the spindle. So if we go to the bit cam, you can see it's just the engraving bit upside down, and this is going to allow me to probe my material. In this case, I'm going to probe the back edge and the left side. So that way, when I'm replacing all the stock over and over, this back edge and that point are the reference. And especially when you're making these boxes that have ledges on top and bottom, you are wanting to think about those points of contact and where you're gridding off of, so that when you put your box together, there's not different ledges on the top and the bottom that you have to sand or plane off later. Okay, so let's go ahead and make that grid. I'm going to go to grid, lower this bit down. I'm going to peer through and make sure I'm connected. Yep. And then in this case, I do need to change my bit diameter, so confirm your bit size is correct. Always do that when you're gridding. Otherwise, you might have the wrong grid. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and lightly touch that there. I'm going to toggle the edge. And I'll take that first point, and I'll take this second point. And then I'm going to come over to this edge, and I'm just going to reference that left side. Cool. So now we have our grid set up. And actually, I'm going to pop over to my laptop, and we're just going to input these, the size of these in Studio. So I'll open up Studio, and we can pop over there, and I'm going to make a new design. Okay. By the way, if anyone's lost at any point, please tell me to stop. Ian's in my ear, and will give me the news, and we can continue on. Okay. So step one, I'm going to measure my stock. So let's do that. So I'm just going to measure this in my calipers. I know it's 1 inch because I nailed it. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a shape, rectangle. 1 inch width, and the height is 0.495. 0.495. Okay, cool. So there's our main shape. Now I'm going to go ahead and go up to design mode, and because I put that grid on the top left, I also want to align my my world so that when I re-import this file into Origin, it shows up in the right spot. So I've went ahead and clicked this add Origin anchor, and you'll see that red triangle show up. And if I grab my shape and I move it around to the top left corner, you'll see it snap there. Okay. And if it doesn't snap properly, what you can do is you can click the shape and click this little button here, and that'll change the anchor point of the shape. And all I want to do is make sure that this point is at 0, 0. Yep, it is at 0, 0, so I can confirm that's correct. Now, this is going to just register the stock, and so I don't really need to do anything with this. All I need to think about is making those 3 spaces for the pins to go. So I know here, all I need to do is make a rectangle, and I can start making it smaller like this. Now, the 4mm bit is what I need to fit inside of this. Now, there's a couple ways to make this, but the easiest way to make this is to essentially take 0.495 and divide it by 3. So I'm just going to come over here and type in 0.495 divided by 3. It's going to give me 0.165. and I can essentially drag that and center it on the shape. And now I have basically the 3 pins. Now, what's nice about this, because it's 3 pins, I'm actually not going to make the other files. On tool, when we go to cut these, I'll just switch from inside to outside, depending on which piece I'm making. The last thing I need to do is make sure this overcuts through. So if we were to cut this now, you would see when I go to an inside cut, it's not going to cut those corners right there, okay? So all I need to do is come back to design mode, and I'm just going to stretch that out a bit. And I'm just going to go back to plan mode and double check that, yep, the part that's curved goes outside of this main shape. And that's going to make sure it clears all the way through. And I'll go ahead and make this one a guide just so we don't accidentally cut it. So that's basically it. All we have to do now is set the depth. I know I want to cut these to 1 inch because my thickness of the material is 1 inch. And then that's it. It's a pretty simple file. I have just that. We're going to start by cutting the inside slots. And then after we cut the short sticks, we'll kind of basically just change it from an inside cut to an outside cut. If you go to plan mode, again, we can just double check and make sure we're close. When we change this to an outside cut, oh, not that one. This one goes to a guide, but this one's an outside. Now you'll notice my bit diameter is set at 1/8 of an inch. So it looks like I won't clear that entire area, but that's incorrect. I need to change this to 4 millimeters, and then I got a better look. Now, you'll see there's a slight area that's not going to get cut. In this case, we could use some offsets, but I did some test cuts earlier, and it's just such a small piece, it breaks off fairly easily. So we are basically set up. I'm going to change it back to inside for now because we're going to cut that first, and we're going to head over to Origin. Okay, so on Origin, if you haven't used Studio before, that file's automatically saved, connected to my account, and when I click it, it's going to download that file just as is. The anchor's in the right area. You can see if I zoom in, the anchor point is a custom anchor denoted by the same red triangle, and I just make sure that's at the 0, 0 spot. Place that, and now we're essentially ready to cut. So I'm going to go ahead and take out the probing bit that I used earlier. And I will put in, just for a quick look and a reminder, this is the 4 millimeter bit here. You'll see the flute's cut from here to here to 0.75 inches, but it also continues up to about 1.2 inches. We need to cut to 1.0 inches. Okay, so I'm going to show you how we do that, because essentially we're going to be cutting more than the flutes can cut. And this is a pretty important part about this. So let me explain how to do it. Okay, so we'll quickly input that we're using a 4 millimeter bit and allow a Z-touch to happen. Cool. Go ahead and plug my spindle in. Now, if we come up to here and we hover this shape, let's see what's going on. Okay, this is great. So I didn't expect to be able to not cut this right now, and I would wonder why can't I cut this? Well, part of that is because of the way AutoPass is, or BenchPilot is setting this up. By default, we're doing offset cuts, and then we're doing a finish cut, and that roughing pass is probably not allowing me to cut that. So if I come back and turn that off, yes, my path does show up. So that's always a good trick. If you're unsure why you can't cut something, make sure your offset's not the wrong number. Make sure your bit size is the right number. Make sure roughing passes is on or off, and then that will tell you if you can fit or not. Now, the real point about roughing passes is we don't want roughing passes on when we do these cuts, because the way roughing passes work, if we maybe come over here for a second, if I were to cut this part here, yeah, here we go. So if I'm cutting this from the top and I'm going through, the way the roughing passes work is it offsets from the final cut by a little smidge for all the original cuts. And then the final cut, it goes out to the final edge and cuts all of that. And so if I have a bit that can't reach that, if I go to the final bottom and I've been roughing it out and then I try to go to the edge, this top part of the bit cannot cut. Now, that's not good. So you don't want to cut deeper than the flutes can go. But if you turn off roughing passes, you can actually cut the same path over and over, and it will only cut the part that's uncut. And so essentially that's what we're going to do to get that depth that is longer than the depth of cut for this bit, because we still have the same thickness material going all the way up to the end. Okay, so when you're doing these, make sure this roughing pass is set off. Okay, I think 4 passes is probably good. We're cutting in grain, so we can be a little more aggressive than normal, and we're ready to cut. The only note I wanted to make before I did this is when I was doing some test cuts the other day, you essentially are only cutting every pass. And so what I like to do is I like to start on this side of the, if we come over to the camera, I like to start on this side. That way it's cutting when it goes here, and then it comes back around and it's not really cutting. And if you noticed how I was clamping, the edge of the material is supported on this side and unsupported on this side. So if you start kind of over here, you'll be pushing into the stop block, which is helpful if you ever have it kind of move on you. So with that, I'm going to turn the spindle on and we're going to cut it. Okay, so this is a pretty quick cut, and you can kind of hear when it's actually cutting. And essentially all we're doing is letting it go. We're going to essentially let this happen 4 times, twice on each piece, and then I'll show you what we do when we go to the other side. Okay, so that's the first cut. Let's just bring this back over here so we can kind of see what we got. Let's see if I can move this out of the way. Yeah. Okay. So you can see all we've done is cut that center pin and cleared that all the way out to the bottom. It's a rough cut. There's no real deal. Maybe I can even bring it over to this side camera here so you can kind of see what we're working with. So yeah, it's just fully cut through. And this is one of the cool things about doing it vertically is we get a perfect flat bottom. You don't have to worry about it. It's going to be kind of ready to roll. So now I would just flip it. I'm going to go ahead and put this in. Okay, and then, so we're just going to replace that. And with our handy bench pilot, all we have to do is turn the spindle back on and hit go. And yeah, you know, it's a pretty quick cut. If you are seeing tear out, maybe reduce the depth of cut. If you're not seeing it, maybe you reduce that. You know, the beauty of basically setting this up once is you can make as many as you like really quickly. And so that would be the first rail, okay? I'm going to quickly cut the other one just so we have the full set. So sorry about that, but, you know, it's pretty quick, especially when you have it all set up. You know, one of the things I really found out while I was doing this at home was, you know, one of the beauties of having it set up on Origin this way is we can come back to this workspace in a week if I need to make another rail. It's already set up as long as the thickness, materials, all the same. You would just save the workspace and come back to it and keep cutting. And that's one of the things that I find with the frame and panels is, you know, if you're doing it on a table saw or the bandsaw or the router, you know, there is a lot of setup to get that evenly spaced stuff. And so Origin kind of makes that pretty easy. Okay, so we got 2 more. While we're doing that, we're going to start thinking a little bit about the rest of the frame and panel. And so these parts essentially need a groove cut into the side to accept the panel. So we'll have the mid-show break after we finish this, and then we will jump into the groove side of things afterwards. And I got a couple tricks up my sleeve for that as well. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty fun little process, you know, of, you know, seeing how we can take a joint that's, you know, classic and, you know, age old, and seeing if we can, make some interesting things with a digital version. Okay, last one. If you saw here, I don't know if you can see from here at these. I put some tape on the edge, and so that way when I slide it up, I know I'm the right distance away from the joint, because if not, obviously you cut into your support bar. Not that I know from experience, but maybe once or twice I've accidentally cut into my workstation. But it's okay. It's a tool, It's a badge of pride, All right, so Jake is coming around the corner and looking pretty good. And this would be essentially those two rails. And so you can see it's still pretty fast, And while Bench Pilot's doing your work, you can be prepping the next thing. Getting studio ready for the next joint. But there we go. Just a couple nice little rails. Okay. All right. So that's the first two rails. Now let's talk about the other ones. So I'm going to come back over to here, and I will move this back over here. With all the camera gear, I can only put the support bar if we're very far over. Okay, so I'm going to just take the same pieces, and I'm going to stick it in there. Same situation. I'm clamping. Now, in this case, because this rail is a lot longer than the previous one, I'm going to take this lower clamp out, and I'm just going to lower it down to where I get a little more stability. The further away you can clamp things, the better, the less chance of it moving on you. So keep that in mind. And now, if we come back over here, we're going to hover the shape. And all I'm going to do is hit inside, change it to outside, and erase the cut history. And we're ready to roll. So I'm just going to start this one. So the beauty of this is a simple file. You can manage it on your own really quickly on tool. Or if you wanted, I guess you could make multiple shapes or multiple files, different workspaces for the inside and the outside. Kind of up to you. I just like the simplicity of a single rectangle set up properly. It works out really nice. And it's just simple. You don't have to overcomplicate the computer side. I'd rather spend time in the shop. Okay, so let's see what we got here. Cool. So I'm just gonna pull this one out so we can see it. So you can see here we have now the outside being cut. It did leave a little skin here, but I mean it's not much. Now don't break it out this way. Just push it in towards itself, and then it should basically pop right off. Cool. So that would be our other side. Now before we keep cutting, it's always a good chance to check your joint. We can still make some adjustments, but let's see what we got. Oh yeah, very nice. Okay, so I like that fit. It's not going anywhere. It's like a nice snappy fit. So I would say at this point, look at that. Let's see if we can get a clear picture of that. Don't you just love Doug fur? The ingrain. I mean, I wish it was a little more riffs on so we didn't have this mess going on, but the top is really nice. And then the edge grain is perfectly quarter sawn. So good fit. Now it's just off to the races. So I'm gonna move this back over here. And we'll do these two other ones real quick. Now, if I wasn't in such a rush by myself, I probably would have marked which side I cut this on, because now I'm forgetting. Here's my little tip. When you put it in the workstation, just mark the side that you're going to cut with an arrow. So you can kind of see like that. That way that goes against the edge of the thing. And then when I flip it, I would do the same thing. Now, you could argue flipping this is actually changing the point of contact. And so if you really wanted to be smart, you would make two different things, and that way when you flip it, you would flip and rotate. So that way the same corner is being registered on all of them. But I milled this one pretty close. So if you mill your material very nice and evenly, you can kind of flip it and it's okay. But if you really wanted to have it perfectly registered on the bottom of the box lid, you would want to kind of make sure all the registration's proper. Here, Jake's not here today, so we're doing what we want. And I did put, I don't know if you saw this. I put Jake. He's here with us. So he, running Origin today. Okay, let me clamp this in, and then we'll do that. Now, one thing you might notice, I don't know if we can see this over here. This clamp, now that I've removed this material here, maybe go a little bit more. Yeah, now that I've removed material, I do want to be careful that I don't clamp that part. I want to clamp above it. Luckily, I already know it's right above it, so we're good. But I may or may not have made that mistake earlier this week and broken off one of my tongues. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and run that one. While we're waiting to finish this up, if there's any questions that you have as I've done this, please put them in the chat. As it mentioned earlier, Ted will take a look at those and let us know towards the end of the show in the Q&A, and we'll go through them. If you have questions, hey, how do I do this in studio? I'm happy to do live demos to answer those questions, or on Origin, or even if you're in a project and having some struggles. If I can help out today, I'd be glad to. Okay, so that one's done. So while that's coming out, let's put the next one in, and then, great. Okay, so I am gonna take my advice this time, and before I cut, I'm just gonna mark which side is this way. Okay. And then while bench pilot's running, I can clean this tenon up, and it's gonna be super nice. Now, we have one more after this, and then all the rails will be cut, and we can start seeing what the next step is. But yeah, I spent a bunch of time last week and over the weekend thinking about some of these things, and you know what? I think it ended up a little bit better than I thought it was going to be. I'm always skeptical sometimes when we think about, hey, how do you take something that's 300 years old and turn it into something new age? But this one was pretty great. Okay, and then last one. The beauty of these clamps is you can kind of hold it with one hand and then let the squeeze clamp do all the rest of the work. You sometimes have to fiddle with all those other types of clamps. Okay. Great. Okay, so this is the last one. I got to say, if you haven't tried out Bench Pilot yet, pretty nice. I find now having Bench Pilot, a lot of my mind that used to be making sure I wasn't making a mistake on Origin while cutting is freed up to do other things, whether that's stare at grain selection for my panel, or sip some coffee and watch the machine do the hard work, or just talk to everyone while it's doing the work during sessions. Okay, cool. So there are all our pieces. Let's go over here and see if we messed anything up. So I'm just going to squeeze this in the middle so it breaks that off a little bit. Nice. Same thing with this. Now, if I wanted to not do this step, I probably would have just put another file that was a little bit wider and have Bench Pilot cut both of them. But you're going to see there's not a visible problem. It's just going to be fine. So, all right, let's come over here and see what we got. So we now have these 4 parts. We have those and those. Now, obviously, if you are doing this for real, you'd probably want to think about what side's up visually. These all look pretty similar, so it doesn't really matter. But these should just go right in. Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, look at that. Looks really good. I love the way the bridle joints come through the edge. Now, if you were working on something that wasn't so, okay, this has definitely got a classic look to it, you know. The mortise and tenon is also a good option, but I really prefer this like external, you know, look of having the two different end grains coming through. It's pretty sweet. So there is our frame. Nice. No mistakes either. All right, let's take a little break. We're going to go over to a computer, and I'm going to tell you a couple things. It's a little different without Jake here, you know? You got to do it all yourself. First up, poll question. That's going to appear on your screen now. I thought of a good poll question this week would be, what other joint that you haven't seen us do 100 times would you like to see? I thought this one was pretty unique. I'm sure there's other ones out there. Maybe you've even thought, hey, wouldn't it be interesting if Origin could make this joint? So put it in there. If you don't have any idea, just put, I don't know. Once you enter that into the question box, you'll be entered for the drawing at the end of the show during Q&A. So take some time to fill that out now. There's no other announcements this week other than we have a shop tour. So in a second, Ian's going to pull shop tour up, and it's from, oh, I forgot his name. Glenn? Is that right? Well, I think he says it in there. So sorry about that, but let's cut to the shop tour and run it.
Okay there, folks. My name is Mike Gandy. I'm a red seal journeyman carpenter from Victoria, British Columbia. This is my shop attached to my house that I built many years ago, and had to build the shop down here to build the house and build the doors. Anyways, coming in my shop, I have some simple wood here, just offcuts that tend to make a ton of use now. I own a shaper, Origin, and got a nice bandsaw and drill press and a little portable kind of MFT workbench that I take. All my lumber storage comes in and gets set up quite easily here on the wall. So sheet goods come in, drop down onto the table saw, nice and easy. Got the table saw set up so as soon as you fire on power, dust collector's going on in the back, and pretty much always leave this blast gate open just so you know you're always set up, you know. And over to the side then, got some storage of job site table saw, sander, and one of the greatest joiner planer combos ever from Hitachi that I look after from a mentor of mine. The wall keeps pretty busy with jigs that you take to work onto the job or in the shop here. More kind of lumber storage. Actually, I guess I should point that out the side here too. Lots of more lumber storage. Always got spillage from work coming, you know. Anyways, once you kind of cut here and use the beautiful sliding addition from SawStop, makes it very helpful. You come around, I've got my original table saw here, which I leave a dado blade set up in. So quite handy when you need to do that. It's just sort of right there. Also, got Norm's router table, you know, all set up with whatever, some simple router, but it does a fine job to keep me busy. Get to watch right in front of the bench here, some episodes of Shaper Sessions, which is always nice, and then do a little drafting as needed. Got some hand tools up there and just extra sort of storage. Bit of a sharpening station. I think the sandpaper just seems to work so well with some water. Little bench grinder. And then yeah, I've actually got a bench here that makes it really easy. Just store all the sustainers under it. It was something I just made out of solid wood that I kind of had left over, and it's just fantastic. One of the Festool vacuums kind of running over top, making it easy to clean and go on with stuff. I'm just making one of those French pleat setups here for the upgrade kit. So just getting that set up. Got an MFT sitting on a bench that I made pretty much just to hold the Shaper Origin. All the extra parts kind of go below, make it really easy and just super comfortable. I can't see the TV from there, so I do need to figure that out, but you kind of make it work in here. The Mighty Capex, just gotta love it. Works so good. And everything's hooked up to dust extraction here. I think I've got 3 extractors going in the shop. When my kids come down here, and they obviously like playing with this now, but anything else, if I want to do some sanding and so on, I always have the dust collection set up to make it easy on them. In the back here, Wayne is keeping an eye on the dust collector room. Man, the cyclones work really good with the big filters up top and just extra hoses and so forth back here, but it keeps it pretty handy and quiet when you close it. Air compressor's down there too, so you don't really hear anything. And then got a bit of a spray room back here. All the stains and lacquers and so forth here, and kind of has a bit of a dumping ground. But the window opens up and I got a fan that goes in and ties on, so at least I'm in here spraying away. I can send it out, don't have to really breathe on it. And yeah, so it's like 16 by 40. It's never gonna have a car in here. It's always gonna have just tools. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting my bench pilot soon. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Nice shop. Mike Gandy, please, well, I don't please anything. Thank you for sending. We will send you a swag pack out for sending that in. If you haven't sent a shop tour in, now's the time. We're getting a little low again, so I sent some emails out this week for people who had already sent it in that we didn't have access to their files anymore. So check your email if you did, and if not, hope to see your shop tour soon. Remember, horizontal landscape, talk over it. 3 to 4 minutes would be good. Can't wait to see it. Great shop. I really dig in the small shop, tight vibe. It's nicely thought out and a joy to see. Also, the Sessions TV in the shop is something I need to get hooked up in mine. I don't have a TV in my shop, but I like that a lot. Okay, with that, I hope everyone filled out the poll question because it's going down. If you want to win giveaways, you had to put it in there. So let's finish this up. Okay, back to it. So we made our frame. Now we get to think about, I mean, this is the pretty fun part. And I will say, one thing I skipped over here is typically when you're doing the frame, you want pretty straight grain, like cathedral grain, craziness, like it just doesn't, it's not a great look. Straight grain, real tight, looks really nice, quarter sawn. So you don't want this to move. You don't want it really cut out of flat sawn material. You want this to be stable. So even if there was nothing in here, this could be a door and it wouldn't really go crazy because it's built with that in mind. But the fun part is when you get into the panels, at least for me. I got a sycamore panel. Let's maybe come down to this top one here. So this is a sycamore panel, and if you don't know quarter sawn sycamore, it has crazy kind of just like chatoyance and patterns and stuff. That's always a good one. So we could, kind of do that. One of my favorites, a nice air-dried walnut. This is the fun part for me, where you get to kind of mix and match the woods, kind of see what you like. I also have a pretty sweet redwood piece that I've already used on a box, and I thought, Doug fir and redwood looks pretty good together. But you can take these panels, mix them to your heart's content, pick pieces that match a certain vibe, change the angle. There's so much you can do with the panels that we're not going to even really get into that today. We're just going to focus on the construction. Okay, so what do? We need to cut grooves on the inside of this. And so let's talk quickly how you do that before we get into Shaper Origin. Typically, if you were doing this, you would either bring it over to a router table or a table saw and kind of cut through it. Now, for these here, you can cut all the way through, and you won't really mess anything up because you're not gonna see the parts that you're cutting into. If you are cutting a pretty wide slot in here, you would cut all the way through, and that would be visible on the end, kind of when you put these together. So you got to think about that. So generally, these are all stopped. So we're gonna like plunge, go to here, retract. Typically, that would be like a router table where you're kind of doing some little sketchy operation of plunge cutting, going over, stopping it with some marks on the router table. in this case, it's going to be pretty easy for us. We're going to use Origin to probe the material. We're going to go in a studio, make the right size groove that we want. Then we're just going to cut it. So with that being said, the first thing I like to do is, if we come to this top view, put it together, mark all the sides you're going to cut. Because when you get over there, you're going to forget, is it this side or that side? And if you've already marked all the area to be removed, you won't make that mistake later, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and put this in. I think in this case, I'm only going to cut one of the wide ones because it's just a little more process, but you'll just follow this for each piece. Okay, so first start. We need to move this workstation shelf back up to the top. So let me grab this, and I'm just going to undo this clamping face and move it back up to the top. Okay, so I'm going to move it all the way to the top one because we want that registration on the top. And we're going to do some kind of tricky things with clamping here, but I'll walk through that right now. Okay, so we're going to use that same datum, which means we don't have to regrid, which is nice. And the way I'm going to set this up is I'm going to put one clamp here, and then I'm going to put this bottom clamp, and I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to bring that to the top, and I'm going to slide it in this front slot vertically. So workstation has slots up and down, and what I found, at least for these smaller pieces, this works pretty well. Okay, so let's take this large part, and I'm going to put my support bar on the top so I can register off of it, and I'm going to make sure that part I marked is on the top, and I'll slide that under and over. Now, if for some reason you cut this and your tongue is bigger than this, you're not going to be able to register on the end, right? It would register on the kind of the notch here. But in this case, works out that it registers there. And then I'm going to take this top clamp and I'm going to squeeze it in as far as I can so I don't touch the end of that tenon, and it's just long enough to clamp there. And then I can bring this up and clamp there. Okay, so let's see. I'll move Origin out of the way so we can get a little better picture of it. So this is the setup we have now, right? We have it indexed off this, it's on the back, and we have our material. So come back over here. If I wanted, I could just use the same grid and the file, or I could, make a new scan and regrid. In this case, I'm going to add the scan. I realize I may be going over a few more pro level moves than we normally go over, but I'm going to go ahead and add the scan, this area, just so I can get an image. And then that's going to create a new workspace that's separate from the other one. And then I can go in here and I can just delete that file that was previously there. That way I don't have to think about it. Okay. So now I have the same index point as we previously had, because the back of the workstation and that point haven't moved, even though I've raised it up. And all I need to do now is kind of probe this material so that I can get the size of the shape. And so this is a pretty new, well, not that new anymore, but it still feels new. There is an ability on Origin now, and if you haven't seen this option, it may be because you haven't enabled it. There's a few features that were a little experimental. If you go to Create, you should see Probe Rectangle and Probe Circle. And this allows you to lower the bit and probe circles or rectangles and kind of capture the space in the real world. So obviously I could take a ruler out and measure it and enter it in the studio, but I could also probe that material with the bit, and then that digital file gets created instantly. If you're not seeing those, we're going to come over to the settings, and we're going to hit extensions, and then you just need to enable it. It's not enabled by default, so you'll have to do that manually if you've never seen it. And then once it's checkmarked, then it'll show up in this menu. Okay, so we already have our grid created, so I care about that. Now I just want to kind of figure out the size of this shape. So I'm going to say Create, Probe Rectangle, and I'm just going to lower this down. Now, somebody's going to argue with me in the comments that I should be probing the back side of this material, and they would be correct. But Jake's not here today, so I'm just going to probe the front very lightly, and I'm going to come over here. I'm going to also probe that. Now, you might not be able to see it right now, but the bit's running into the vertical piece here. So I'm just going to come up and hit that depth button, and I'm going to raise the bit up a little bit until I can kind of move over it, and then I'll lower it back down to where it's just able to touch the material, but not that. And you might have to look underneath. You're not going to be able to see what I'm talking about, but I'm just raising and lowering a bit to get around there. So now I have that third point, and then I'm actually going to take bench pilot off for a minute so I can just pick up origin. Then I'm going to lower it down in the back so that I can hit the back side of this shape to capture that. And then I'm going to go over here to the other side and capture this part. Just kind of peek under there. It's a little hard to see, but there we go. So now we have that shape that represents kind of my stock. And so I'm just going to go ahead and export that so we can modify it in Studio. So in design mode, you can hit that export button. It'll automatically name it for you if you're lazy like me and you don't want to name it. Just do that. And then that will be the latest file in Studio. So we'll just come back over to the laptop. And the cool thing about this is if you go to the Studio website and you just go to studio.shapertools.com, that is a Studio file that we uploaded. And it's the latest modified file. Well, something is clearly wrong here, huh? Okay, let's talk about this for a second. So you can see here my grid is like this, but the file is pretty wonky. So I'm not sure exactly what happened. Maybe I screwed something up. So in that case, we're just going to come back over here and I'm going to do a quick double check and see what's going on. Yes. Okay, so this makes a little more sense to me why this is actually happening. So let's actually, yeah, this is a great thing to talk about. Teachable moment. Okay, so if you remember previously, I'm just going to make a little rectangle to kind of represent my stock. I previously kind of had this kind of over in the corner, and I had gridded off this small piece of stock, right? I'd put a grid point there, and there. Now, that thing, if you bring it out, it's probably not quite right because it's pretty small. I took 2 points really close to each other. Now, if I took 2 points further away, it would be less of an error. So that's probably what happened here is that original grid was not quite there. It's fine. We're just going to use this. If you ever see this shape not being in the right orientation, just make a new scan, regrid, and then move on. So let's just go ahead and do that. Now, I'm just going to make a new grid real quick while we're here. And I'll do it off the front as well, but ideally you would do it off the back. So here's 1, 2, and then I will raise this up. Maybe this is why Jake does it the right way. All right, let's see. Lowering it down. All right, cool. So there's now our grid is off the front corner. So if there is thickness play when I milled my material and I put the next one up, obviously that's going to change where these files land. So that's kind of when we're talking about registration points. You're always thinking about, okay, my material is this thick and my grid's on this side. So if I replace material and I have the same thickness, everything's referenced. But if my material thickness grows or shrinks, it's going to always be off that one face. If you pick the wrong face, then you're compounding the error when you do that, the cuts. So just think about reference faces. If you do mill your material properly, it's less of an issue. But if you do have different thickness material, you'll see more problem. Okay, now I'm not even going to regrid the shape. I'm just going to hit export again. And let's see if that's closer. Now, third option would be just to redo the grid as well. So this is what the original export 1 looked like, right? Now let's load it again and see what we got. Okay, on the money, okay? So, good teachable moment. All right, now back to it. Okay, so this is if we kind of look at this is representing this entire shape, here to here, here to here, okay? Now, we know that the end, there's a 1-inch cutout, okay? So we're going to go ahead and put 2 rectangles at the ends to match that. I'm just going to snap them to the shape here, and then I'll duplicate that with a Command D option and kind of bring it over here and snap it to that. So that's where those cheeks are. If we look at here, that's the 1-inch. Yeah, this is the 1-inch from here to here, as well as here. You can kind of, actually look at that, that's pretty cool. So you'll see that I'm kind of designing the shapes in so that I know where they're at, okay? Now, the groove that we need is actually, if you think about the way this goes together, I'm just going to come back over here to this. So when we put these together, we're going to need to cut into this one grooved, and we're going to need to cut into this one grooved. And we need this point, this little apex, to kind of join in the center here. And so we need to add some extra distance on each cut so that when we cut this one, it cuts a little beyond this edge to more like here. Same thing at the other end. And then same thing on this. When we're cutting this, we're not going to stop the groove at this line. We're going to go a little beyond, because that panel, the panel that goes in, wants to be, we don't want it line to line. We want it in there, you know? Okay? So I think I came up with pretty cool little trick to do this. So let's say we wanted to do this walnut piece. So I'm just going to quickly measure the thickness, 0.31, 0.314, all right, let's say 0.31, yeah, 312, just to put it there. So I'm going to make a rectangle here. Here we go, and I'm going to type in the height of 0.312. Okay, so that's the thickness of this groove, and it's going to run along the middle of this channel. Now, if I go ahead and snap this to the center of this, I can essentially scale that out, and it's going to snap when I get to that point. Okay, so now the groove is exactly to where the apex is. So if we come back here, it's to this point here, but we need it to grow a little more. So how do we do it, and how do we do it smartly? Well, we need to know how deep we're going to cut this, and I'm going to say I'm going to cut it 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so if you think about it, I'm going to cut 1/4 of an inch into the groove, which means every side's going to have 1/4 inch on the edge. So if I add 1/2 inch to this line, now we get something that was going to be very, very close. So I'm just going to come up to the width, and I'm going to say plus 0.5, enter. So now you can see it's actually going to cut into those cheeks just a little bit by 1/4 of an inch. And if I nail my 1/4 inch depth, hopefully we get a really nice thing all the way around. Now, the only note that's going to cause us a little bit of drama later is when we go to cut this on the inside, and we have a 4mm bit, we're gonna not cut those corners. And so ideally we'd probably cut a little bit more than 1/4 inch just so we have some clearance. But I would say that's what the chisel's for. Okay, so we're gonna go into there. I'm gonna go ahead and just make sure everything looks good. So that I don't import all these other shapes, I'm just gonna go ahead and turn them into guides. Okay, so I'm gonna go to plan mode, change that to a guide. Oh, wrong one. I want this one, and this one. Change that to a guide type. And then this is an inside with 0.25 depth. Okay, that's it. That's the file. We're gonna pop back over to Origin. I'll remove this. Yep. Okay. I'll put that in and plop this in here. Now, earlier I did a Z-touch on my material, and because I don't have as much clamping force as I would like, it moved the material a little bit. So I'm just going to Z-touch on the top of the workstation right above my material. Should be close enough for what we're looking for. I will turn that. There's our touch off. Okay, and then this is the old file. You know, if you edit in Studio, it's not automatically going to show up on Origin. We need to go in there and import it. So before I do that, I'll turn this old shape into a guide because we don't want to cut anything from the previous one. Go to design mode, import, Origin export to. Okay, now It looks like I forgot to put my custom anchor in, so I'm just gonna, so you can see that when I try to line it up, it's not lining up. That's because the anchor is not a custom anchor, it's a center anchor. So I'm just gonna go back to Studio for a second, and I will click this Add Anchor Origin button, and that way it shows up right here in the top corner, bottom corner. And then when I go back to Import on Origin, select that same file. Boom. Now our file is referencing that front corner. I'm just going to line that up to 0, 0. And you get a nice visualization that we're going to overcut just in that cheek just a little bit. Same thing over there. The visualizer is great for making sure we don't make a mistake. Clip into Bench Pilot. And now this is where, before we cut, we're always going to click this top passes button and take a quick look. We do want a roughing pass on this one because we don't have to deal with that depth problem from earlier. So I'm going to turn that back on just to get a little nicer, cleaner cut. And then I'll do it in 2 passes. That seems fine. All right. So now we're just going to let those cut. And so I'm only going to do that. I'm realizing we're a little bit over time from where I'd like to be, so I think we'll probably just cut this one. But if you wanted to do it properly, you would cut this one, replace the long stock, and then just change it to the shorter stock, redo the probe, rebuild the file real quick, and cut that. And then you have a perfect setup for, recutting these over and over. So pretty simple process. I really tried to see like how we can do this without too much software drama. And actually, I'm pretty pleased that it's definitely totally doable. If you're new to Studio and Origin, I think with a little bit of practice, with the grid, with the different types of bits, all this stuff is totally doable. And it's a really nice, easy way to make frame and panels because in the past, as soon as you move that table saw fence, as soon as you move that router fence, change the depth on the router, change the bit, like you end up having to, reset it. And it takes a long time to set up the joints to kind of cut perfectly. And with Origin, we just kind of get that for free. So if you haven't tried frame and panel out, maybe give Origin a try. All right, so let's see what we got. Looks pretty good. Now, before I take it out, I'm going to take our panel that I cut. And note, this hasn't been sized for the thing yet. And I'm just going to kind of slide it in there. Oh, yeah. Very nice. So that's a good fit there. I'm very happy with that. Not too hard, not too soft. It's not going anywhere. But it's also not stressing the joint. And, yeah, look at that. Now, one thing I did when I was at home last week, I did have one of these kind of chip off. So, be a little careful when you're cutting in. There's not a whole lot of meat here. And if it's kind of going through there might be a tendency. But, hey, look at that. Doug fir is pretty chippy, and look how clean that is. So that, yeah, you could use slower speeds to prevent that, or you could even, do more cuts, or you could basically remove that roughing pass. Sometimes the roughing pass at the end might take that big chunk at the same time. So yeah, that's that. Let's see, we're 5:06, so we're 5 minutes over. Let's put this together just here so you can see it. So I'll move this out of the way. So you can see here, that little part's going to get covered when we put this together. And, once we did the groove on this piece, I don't know if you can see into there, but you can see how we need to clear out past that point so that we have a nice insertion for when we get this. And then the idea would be that this panel just kind of is going to seat there all the way, and then it would also seat there. So in this case, we're not going to have a chance to finish this one, but I did make one last week. So let me just show you how that looks. So this is a little dry fit right now, so it's not totally done, but you'll get the picture. So here's a little box I made, kind of a Krenov style bridal joint box. I thought it was pretty cool. I used box joints, so maybe I'd go and make some fancier dovetails if I wanted to finish it. But here's the framing panel, and the idea would be, you know, find some nice hinges here, insert them in the back, and then this would open up like that. Little tray on the inside that slides left and right, and here's the framing panel. Just get that out of the way, and I can take that apart so you can kind of see how it all goes together. In this case, I was very specific about how I wanted the pieces to align. But you can see, you know, we have our parts here. We have our sliding. This is the amount of sliding I like. I mean, it's like it almost comes out if you were to shake it, but it also holds vertically. That's probably a pretty good fit in my mind. And then once you get those together, these just kind of all slide in. And if you get lucky, on the last one, you'll get a nice little click. Yeah, so there's frame and panel, shaper origin. All right, that's the show. I hope you enjoyed it. Jake, thank you very much. We'll see you next week. Well, in 2 weeks. Have a good night.